Detective Frank Wallace had built his life on the illusion of control. In his suburban neighborhood, lined with manicured lawns and polished driveways, he was known as the man who kept order both on and off duty. He wore his uniform with pride, shaking hands at community events and earning nods of respect from neighbors who believed he was the backbone of safety. At home, he presented himself as a family man, disciplined and reliable. His colleagues described him as strict but dependable, the kind of officer who never let rules slide. Yet beneath that polished exterior, Frank carried a darkness that most people never saw. His deep prejudice shaped the way he spoke, the way he judged, and the way he enforced the law. He was the kind of officer who pulled over drivers based on skin color, excused it as instinct, and laughed it off with coworkers who shared his narrow views. But Frank's carefully maintained identity began to unravel the moment Maya moved in next door. She was young, ambitious, and confident, a presence that stood out in the quiet neighborhood. For Frank, Maya represented everything he outwardly dismissed yet secretly craved. At first, he told himself it was just curiosity. He watched her from his window, timing when she came and went. Curiosity turned into fascination, and fascination soon became desire. His mind spun with contradictions. The same man who mocked diversity behind closed doors was now drawn into an affair that contradicted his own hateful words. Frank thrived on control, but this situation stripped him of it. He began engineering excuses to linger outside when she returned from work, manufacturing conversations that seemed casual on the surface but carried an undercurrent of something more. The attention grew into late-night visits, quiet enough to avoid raising suspicion, yet reckless in the risk they carried. What began as stolen moments quickly spiraled into a secret relationship that consumed him. This double life gave Frank a dangerous thrill. During the day, he wore the mask of authority, barking orders and enforcing laws with an iron fist. At night, he lived a reality where that mask was stripped away, where his attraction overpowered his prejudice. The contradiction gnawed at him. He was terrified of discovery, not just by his wife or colleagues, but by the community that had built him into a figure of trust. He knew that exposure would unravel everything he had worked for, yet the temptation was stronger than his fear. The danger of his secret wasn't just in the act of betrayal, but in the psychology behind it. Frank's affair wasn't born from love or even genuine affection. It was fueled by obsession, control, and the thrill of breaking his own rigid rules. Every time he stepped into Maya's house, he wasn't just betraying his family and his badge. He was dismantling the very persona he had spent years building. What he didn't realize was that this contradiction, this dangerous game of living two lives, was setting the stage for something far darker than he could ever control. Frank believed that as long as he kept his life compartmentalized, no one would ever uncover the truth. The affair with Maya became his escape, a hidden world that fed the parts of him he refused to acknowledge. What started with late-night visits soon transformed into a routine he couldn't live without. He would invent reasons to leave his home, pretending to be on call or working overtime, when in reality he was slipping next door. At first, Maya accepted the secrecy, convincing herself that it was only temporary. But over time, the weight of living in the shadows began to suffocate her. She realized that Frank's attention wasn't flattering. It was consuming. Frank's behavior shifted from passionate to possessive. He didn't just want her time, he wanted her obedience. He started watching her house constantly, noting every visitor and tracking when lights went on and off. His gaze lingered long enough for neighbors to notice, though no one dared confront the respected officer. Maya began to feel like she was under surveillance in her own home. She tried to rationalize his actions as protective instincts, but the truth was darker. Frank wasn't safeguarding her. He was monitoring her. Using his access as a police officer, he crossed lines that should never have been blurred. He quietly ran background checks on the people Maya interacted with, digging for any detail that could give him leverage. He monitored her phone activity through unofficial channels, exploiting resources meant for law enforcement to fuel his obsession. Each step pulled him further from professionalism and deeper into dangerous territory. For Frank, this wasn't a relationship. It was control disguised as intimacy. Maya's unease grew with every passing week. She noticed how he would show up unexpectedly, sometimes parked near her workplace, other times sitting outside her home without explanation. When she questioned him, he brushed it off with half-truths and vague reassurances, but his eyes revealed something more dangerous, a refusal to let go. The power dynamic between them shifted. Maya, once confident, began to feel trapped in an invisible cage built by Frank's authority and obsession. His jealousy reached unbearable heights. If she so much as exchanged polite words with another man, whether a delivery driver or a colleague, Frank's temper would flare. He used intimidation rather than outright confrontation, but the message was clear. She belonged to him, and any hint of independence was a threat to his control. The contradiction in his life deepened. By day, he presented himself as a guardian of order. By night, he became a man consumed by fear of losing his grip on Maya. The more he tried to control her, the more cracks began to form in their secret. Maya's growing discomfort showed in her behavior, and Frank's paranoia amplified in response. He was convinced that if she ever left him or revealed the affair, his career, reputation, and family would collapse. This toxic blend of fear, prejudice, and desire fueled a storm that could only end in devastation. What neither of them realized was that the point of no return was closer than either dared to imagine. Maya eventually reached the point where the secrecy and suffocation became unbearable. What had once been an escape had turned into a prison, and she could no longer ignore the warning signs. Frank's intensity, once mistaken for passion, now felt like a looming threat. Every knock at her door after midnight, every unexplained appearance outside her job, every sudden call from a blocked number wore her down. She realized she wasn't in control of this relationship at all. Frank was. The decision to end it wasn't easy, but she knew it was necessary for her safety and peace of mind. When Maya finally pulled away, Frank's world collapsed. To him, the affair wasn't simply an indulgence, but a possession. He didn't see her choice as a rejection. He saw it as betrayal. His rage boiled beneath the surface, hidden behind the same polished smile he wore for neighbors and coworkers. Yet the cracks in his facade grew more visible. Those around him began noticing his unpredictable moods and sudden outbursts. At work, he snapped at colleagues for minor mistakes, showing a temper that seemed out of place for the usually composed officer. He began abusing his authority during traffic stops, punishing drivers more harshly than necessary, as if exerting power there could replace the control he had lost with Maya. Meanwhile, Maya tried to distance herself quietly, but the tighter she pulled away, the harder Frank tried to reel her back. He called her incessantly, leaving long voicemails filled with accusations and pleas. When she stopped answering, he escalated, showing up outside her home at odd hours, sometimes in uniform, other times in plain clothes, blending his two lives in ways that made the danger feel more imminent. Neighbors heard raised voices but dismissed them, reluctant to challenge a police officer's private affairs. Frank's paranoia began to consume him. He convinced himself that Maya might tell someone about the affair, and the thought of exposure terrified him more than anything. His reputation, his career, his family, all of it could be destroyed in an instant if she spoke. The fear of losing everything morphed into obsession. He started imagining scenarios where she was plotting against him, even though she only wanted freedom. In his mind, ending the relationship wasn't just about her moving on, it was about her threatening the entire foundation of his life. As the weeks passed, Frank's grip on reality weakened. He began drinking more, isolating himself from colleagues, and avoiding his family under the excuse of long work shifts. But behind the locked doors of his patrol car, he spiraled deeper into dangerous thoughts. To him, Maya's independence was intolerable. The possibility of her telling the truth became his greatest fear. And in Frank's distorted logic, if he couldn't have her, and if she dared to destroy him, then he would rather erase her entirely. The breaking point had arrived. Though Maya didn't yet realize how close she was to the storm. For Frank, it wasn't just about love or desire anymore. It had transformed into a dangerous combination of pride, fear, and fury. He had lost control, and in his mind, the only way to reclaim it was through an act so final that it would silence her forever. The night that sealed Maya's fate began like many others, with Frank circling her life in the shadows. It was a stormy evening, rain streaking down the windows of their quiet neighborhood, masking the unease that had been building for weeks. Maya had tried to cut off all communication, blocking his calls and refusing to answer the door when he appeared uninvited. But Frank was relentless. That night he waited in his patrol car at the edge of town, waiting for the opportunity to make his move. His obsession had festered into rage, and rage had hardened into resolve. Maya had gone out earlier that evening, attempting to escape the suffocation of her home and the fear that clung to her. Friends recalled that she seemed tense, glancing over her shoulder as though expecting to see someone following. She drove back alone, unaware that Frank was tailing her at a distance. The storm made it easier for him to stay hidden. When she turned onto a quiet road just outside of town, her headlights caught the reflection of his car lurking in the darkness. Moments later, her vehicle was found abandoned, hazards blinking in the rain. What happened next could only be pieced together from evidence and fragments of testimony. There were signs of a struggle near the roadside, muddy footprints, torn fabric, and the unmistakable imprint of force. Investigators later determined that Frank had intercepted her there, confronting her one last time. To him, this was not a conversation. It was a reckoning. His desperation, fueled by the fear of losing everything, erupted into violence. The storm drowned out her cries, leaving only the echo of rain on metal and asphalt. Hours later, a search team discovered Maya's lifeless body in a wooded area not far from the abandoned car. The brutality of the attack revealed how personal the crime was. She had fought back, leaving scratches and defensive wounds that spoke of her determination to survive. But Frank's strength and rage overwhelmed her. The very man sworn to protect the innocent had become the predator, silencing the woman who had once been the center of his obsession. In the aftermath, Frank attempted to craft an alibi, hiding behind the authority of his badge. He pretended to be the shocked neighbor when news of Maya's disappearance spread, even joining in the initial search effort as though his hands were clean. Yet his mask was already slipping. Surveillance cameras placed his patrol car near the scene during the critical hours, and forensic analysis uncovered his fingerprints on her vehicle and belongings. Rumors spread quickly through the department. Officers who had once admired him now watched with suspicion. The story of the honorable detective was unraveling in real time, replaced by whispers of corruption and abuse of power. Frank tried to carry on as though nothing had happened, but his eyes betrayed him. He was no longer the respected officer of the law. He was the prime suspect in a crime that shocked the very community he had sworn to serve. Frank's downfall began the moment investigators connected the first piece of evidence to him. At first, his colleagues resisted the thought. How could a decorated detective, a man trusted with authority, be capable of such brutality? But the facts grew impossible to ignore. Surveillance footage placed his patrol car at the exact stretch of road where Maya's vehicle was found. Forensic teams uncovered fingerprints on her door handle and personal items, eliminating any chance of coincidence. When the results came back, the narrative shifted. The community that once hailed him as a protector began to whisper about betrayal. Detectives moved quickly, knowing the risk of letting an officer remain free under such suspicion. Frank was arrested in his own home, taken away in handcuffs before stunned neighbors who had believed in his carefully crafted image. The sight of a uniformed man, once a symbol of authority, reduced to a criminal suspect sent shockwaves through the quiet suburb. His wife wept as he was escorted out, while the media swarmed, capturing the image that would circulate nationwide, a police officer whose secrets had exploded into the open. The trial became a spectacle. Prosecutors painted Frank as a man torn apart by hypocrisy, an officer who publicly clung to prejudice while privately indulging in the very relationship he outwardly condemned. They described how his obsession turned to possession, and possession to violence. Jurors listened to testimony from forensic experts, neighbors who recalled suspicious behavior, and colleagues who reluctantly admitted noticing his recent instability. The evidence built an unshakable case. This wasn't a crime of passion, but a calculated act born from fear of exposure. The defense tried to frame the affair as consensual and the murder as unprovable, arguing that Frank's presence near the scene didn't confirm guilt. But the weight of the physical evidence was overwhelming. The scratches on his arms matched Maya's DNA, the timelines aligned too perfectly, and his attempts at covering his tracks revealed knowledge only the killer could possess. Each revelation chipped away at any doubt,